Elon Musk's Neuralink brain implant is pushing the boundaries of what modern neuroscience can achieve. I think that's something we can all agree on. But the company might also be pushing the boundaries of what is considered to be safe or even possible when it comes to brain-computer interface technology. Neuralink is in a vulnerable position right now as they begin to face the realities of human experimentation. And in the midst of all this, a new competitor is rising up. A ghost from Elon Musk's past has returned to take the throne with a better, safer brain implant. This could be a problem. Let's begin with a story. This is Benjamin Rapaport. You probably don't recognize him, but he was one of the 9 founding fathers of Neuralink back in the year 2017. Elon Musk says that he interviewed over 1,000 people before deciding on the team of 8 doctors, scientists, and engineers that would join him in the creation of a new brain implant technology. And looking at Ben's resume, it's easy to see why he made the cut. A master's degree in physics and mathematics from Harvard, a Master of Science from Oxford, a PhD in engineering from MIT, and a medical degree from Harvard Medical School. He was working as a resident neurosurgeon in the years before Neuralink came to be. So that is all very important to establish that this is not just another tech bro. This is a person who brings massive credibility to the table. So when we tell you that Benjamin left Neuralink in March 2018, just 1 year after the company was announced to the public, we know that this decision carries some weight. And the primary reason for Ben's departure is also the key to today's story: safety. Without getting too deep into the weeds on how brain-computer interfaces work, we know that the brain is teeming with electrical activity. Everything that you do, everything you feel, everything that you know, it all begins with trillions of electrical signals bouncing around through billions of neurons inside the gray matter of the human brain. This has been known for 100 years. Hans Berger started his experiments with electroencephalography in 1924, but even after a century of observation, the human brain is still mysterious. We know that the best clues to solve our mystery are found closest to the source, inside the human skull. We can observe brain activity from the outside by placing electrodes on the scalp, but the signals are muffled. Imagine you're living in an apartment and your next-door neighbor is having a party. You can try to listen in through the wall, and that will provide some information about what's going on. You might know what kind of music they're listening to, the approximate size of the group if they're laughing or arguing. Imagine that the people attending the party are neurons in a human brain. By observing them through a wall or a skull, you can measure the overall vibe of the party, but you will never know the details of what went on inside. But if you were able to walk through the door and enter the room, suddenly there would be infinitely more detail to learn about the party. You would hear the music clearly, you would see the people, you would know what they are saying. And once inside, you could go one step further and walk right up to a neuron and start a conversation. From here, there's no telling how much you can learn. This is all a metaphor for the invasiveness of BCI. But instead of opening a door, we have to cut through skin and bone, and in order to initiate that personal conversation with a neuron, we need to penetrate the brain matter. This all comes at a cost. We know that Elon Musk is a minimalist when it comes to design, but he's a maximalist when it comes to performance. The fastest cars, the most powerful rockets, and his approach to Neuralink is no different. Elon would never be satisfied with just eavesdropping on the party. He's going straight to interrogating the neurons as close up as possible. The cost of an invasive BCI implant is always going to be damage to the brain. There is no way to skirt around the fact that when you penetrate the brain tissue, you cause physical damage. The first invasive brain implant dates back to the early 2000s, the Utah Array, created by BlackRock Neuroscience. It's like a very small bed of nails that would penetrate the outer cortex of the brain with tiny rigid pins. The depth of the implant would typically be around 1.5 millimeters, and these implants are known to cause scar tissue and physical rejection from the brain material, so they can't be used as long-term permanent solutions. Once the scar tissue forms, the ability to have a conversation with the neuron is greatly reduced. This is the primary challenge that Neuralink was hoping to overcome with their own BCI design, one that used ultra-thin and ultra-flexible threads to interface with the brain tissue. The idea being that these microscopic threads would carry the electrode connections into the brain so gently that the body wouldn't even notice, and hence wouldn't try to reject the implant or form any scar tissue. And this theory could prove to be true, but so far it's proven to be ineffective at maintaining a stable connection to the brain. Neuralink patient 0, Noland Arbaugh, experienced the successful implantation of 64 Neuralink threads. These threads carried a total of 1,024 individual electrodes directly into his cerebral cortex, and this happened for the first time in late January 2024. By February, 85% of those threads had retracted from the brain. They fell out. And this is a problem that Neuralink may have been expecting. Several anonymous sources who claim to work at the company told Reuters that the thread retraction had been an issue with monkey and pig test subjects for years. This is unconfirmed reporting, but it wouldn't be surprising given the severity of the retraction issue with Nolan's implant. It would be weird for this to have happened for the first time so many years into the testing phase. What's even more troubling is that Nolan has said that he was never even informed on the possibility of thread retraction. He was completely taken by surprise when the problem occurred. Neuralink claims to have a solution, though, and this has been approved by the FDA, but it's not exactly an ideal fix, and this relates directly to Benjamin Rapaport's concerns with patient safety in this field. So, the original Utah array with the rigid little pins penetrated 1.5 millimeters deep into the brain. Neuralink took that even further with their flexible threads, reaching depths between 3 and 5 millimeters into Nolan's brain matter. But this was clearly not effective, so the new plan is to place the threads 8 millimeters deep into Neuralink's second human patient. For those with trouble visualizing what a millimeter is, 8 millimeters is just a bit less than 1/3 of an inch. So that's getting pretty deep. Neuralink started off at double the industry standard, and now they're already going to double that again, and double the depth means double the potential damage to the brain matter, double the potential for negative side effects. Now, this is still not nearly as deep as other current electrode procedures like deep brain stimulation, for example, but it's still very much unknown what kind of damage 64 insertions, each 8 millimeters deep across a relatively small segment of the brain, might do. It's also not known if this change will even solve the problem for Neuralink. If we are still seeing retraction with the threads in the next patient, then it's possible that Neuralink's design, as innovative as it may be, just doesn't work. This is obviously not the kind of outcome that a business leader like Elon Musk is going to accept, but in science there is always the potential of being proven wrong. It's the reason that we do experiments in the first place. There's a very real potential here that Neuralink is just another very good idea in theory that didn't work out in reality. There are no shortage of these failed ideas in history, and it's an outcome that we should be prepared for. What if you didn't need to penetrate the brain 8 millimeters, or 3 millimeters, or even 1 millimeter? What if you could get all of the information you need just by walking through the door of the party and going no further than that? This is the question that Benjamin Rapaport left Neuralink to investigate, and he may have already found the answer. This is the Layer 7 cortical interface. It's an ultra-thin film array that's only 1/5 the thickness of a human hair and covered with 1,024 tiny electrode sensors. It's designed to sit on top of your brain where it can very effectively eavesdrop on all of the conversations that your neurons are having without ever having to cause any physical damage to your brain matter. Sounds like a pretty good deal. The Layer 7 was created by Precision Neuroscience, who you probably never heard of, but this is the company that was founded by Benjamin Rapaport after he left Neuralink. And this thin film array is the safer, less invasive BCI technology that he had envisioned back in 2018, one that Elon Musk would have considered to be inferior because it doesn't penetrate deep enough into the neurons. But in reality, the opposite has proven to be true. While Neuralink's total electrode count in human trials has dropped over time from 1,024 down to just 154, Precision has been pushing forward, starting with one cortical interface and then adding a second to the same patient for a total of 2,048 electrodes. That was last summer, and just recently, in April 2024, Precision set a new record with 4 interfaces implanted on one human brain for a total of 4,096 electrodes, all reading brain signals at the same time. The thin film array is designed to be implanted through a small slit that's cut into the patient's skull. Then the electrodes are slid in between the brain and its outer protective layer called the dura. The thin, flexible nature of the array allows it to conform perfectly to the wrinkled shape of the cerebral cortex, like saran wrap. And then a wireless transmitter is placed underneath the user's skin that plugs into the electrodes and broadcasts the neural signal wirelessly through Bluetooth. With such a small, thin cut into the skull, just 1 millimeter across, there can be multiple arrays placed on different regions of the brain without compromising the patient's skull integrity. You could have multiple Neuralinks, but the skull is pretty quickly going to start resembling Swiss cheese with all of those holes cut into it. Precision has already tested its Layer 7 cortical interface with 14 human patients over the past 3 years. This is made possible because the thin film array is so easy and harmless to place onto and remove from the brain that the procedure can be incorporated into any routine neural surgery. So what Precision does, they find a case where a patient is already undergoing open brain surgery for something like a benign tumor removal or Parkinson's disease treatment, that they simply place their array on the surface of the patient's exposed brain and begin recording data. In some of these cases, the patient is awake through the entire procedure and will participate in motion capture activities that map physical movement of the hands and fingers to electrical signals in their brain. This is a huge advantage to Precision that Neuralink cannot match right now. Neuralink is only going ahead with their implant in people who already have full body paralysis, so that limits their research to imagined movement. They can't capture physical movement of their patient at the same time. And then when Precision has got their data, they simply lift the array off of the patient's brain and their head is sewn back up with no trace that the BCI was ever there. What the company has already been able to prove is that you don't really need to penetrate the brain in order to collect high-resolution data from the neurons. You only need to figure out how to bypass the skull. Just being very close on top of the brain matter is still very good, or at least good enough for any practical medical reason. Maybe Neuralink still needs to stick people with threads to do Elon's whole merge the human brain with AI thing, or whatever that's supposed to be, but if we just want to help people with disabilities and illness to live better lives, then it's already been proven that we do not have to saw holes in their skull or damage their brains to do that. So in many ways, what Precision has done here is dramatically lower the barrier to entry for brain-computer interface, much more so than Neuralink ever could, and innovations like this are exactly the kind of development that will make brain-computer interface one of the biggest stories of the decade to come.